In the heart of Istanbul, in a crowded restaurant at noon, an elderly man with a thin beard ordered only a small bowl of soup and a piece of bread. The manager, irritated by the fact that he wasn't consuming enough, raised his voice in front of everyone. "If you want to eat so little, go somewhere else. We don't serve crumbs here." The words echoed among the full tables. Laughter followed. Some customers lifted their phones, recording the scene as if it were entertainment. The elderly man kept his calm posture, explaining softly, "My son, I simply follow what the Prophet taught, to eat without excess." The manager mocked him, rolling his eyes, drawing even more laughter around them. Embarrassment spread through the room like a heavy shadow over the old man. But then comes the question that cuts through the air. Why was a man so composed humiliated for choosing moderation? No one in that place imagined that minutes later something would unfold, something so unexpected and quiet that it would make the entire restaurant freeze. A sudden shift would change the expression of every witness and reveal the spiritual weight of a teaching so many ignore. Before continuing, check if you're subscribed and write in the comments which city you're watching from. A few streets away from the Spice Bazaar lived the elderly man everyone simply called Uncle Halim. His apartment was small, lit by a modest window that let in the smell of bakeries at dawn. He woke early, made his first prayer in silence, and prepared a weak coffee, always in the same cup worn by time. His health no longer responded the way it once did. He walked slowly, breathed carefully, and his hands sometimes trembled when he held heavier objects. Even so, he maintained admirable discipline. His meals were simple, small portions, fresh water, and nothing beyond what was necessary. Some found it strange, others claimed it was excessive, but he kept the practice with serenity. 1/3 for food, 1/3 for water, 1/3 for air, he murmured before eating, repeating the hadith that guided his entire adult life. Halim never ate until he was full, not out of frugality but devotion. He saw moderation as a way to honor Allah, believing that discipline at the table shaped discipline in the heart. He loved to say that whoever masters hunger masters themselves. Despite his quiet routine, there was something unspoken behind his persistence, something he never fully explained, but that surfaced in his eyes whenever he mentioned the prophetic guidance. An old reason, intimate and almost sacred, one that made him refuse to abandon this habit, even on his most tiring days. The morning moved with Istanbul's usual rhythm, and Uncle Halim left home with slow steps, carrying only a light bag and the calm that followed him everywhere. The sun reflected off the damp cobblestones of the central square, where workers, tourists, and students mixed as they searched for a quick meal. He chose the same popular restaurant he visited from time to time, not for culinary preference, but because they served fresh soup and soft bread, exactly what his stomach tolerated. The place was busy, full tables, waiters rushing back and forth, and the clatter of silverware filling the air. Halim found a discreet corner seat and waited patiently for service. Some customers glanced at him, not because of who he was, but because of the slow way he adjusted his chair. The hurried waiter approached. "What would you like today, sir?" "Just a small bowl of soup and a piece of bread," he replied gently. The waiter wrote it down, though his expression betrayed confusion. When he brought the order to the kitchen, the manager overheard and frowned. "That man asking for the smallest portion again?" he muttered, irritation rising. "He takes up a table and brings no profit." He left the counter and walked to Halim's table, imposing himself with heavy steps. "You really intend to order only that?" he asked, crossing his arms. Halim looked up. "Yes, my son, that's enough for me." The manager sighed loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. "You know this isn't worthwhile for the establishment. This place is not for people who want to eat crumbs." Two young men at the next table exchanged glances and laughed. "Poor guy. Must be trying to save every coin," one of them whispered. Halim kept his expression calm. "It's not about saving money. It's simply a guidance I've followed all my life." The manager leaned forward. "Guidance? To eat only 1/3, drink another third, and leave space for air." The answer, which should have inspired respect, brought even more disdain. "This is a restaurant, not a mosque," the manager replied, raising his voice. "These tables are for customers who order full meals." Some customers stopped eating, sensing the tension. The waiter watched from a distance, uncomfortable. An older woman shook her head in disapproval at the manager's behavior. Halim took a deep breath, trying to end the situation gently. "If it's a problem, I can leave." The manager didn't miss the chance. "That would be better. We can't serve people who don't follow the rules here." The sentence came out loud enough to echo across the square. Within seconds, curious onlookers began turning toward the table, trying to understand what the elderly man had done wrong. A simple order had become a target of irritation, and now the crowd waited to hear what rule such a calm man had supposedly broken. The restaurant remained busy, but the tension around Uncle Halim grew. The manager, irritated by his presence, adjusted his apron and raised his voice so everyone could hear his authority. "Sir, I've already made it clear. We don't serve such small orders. If you want to eat, choose something appropriate from the menu. Otherwise, please leave." The blunt tone drew even more attention. Customers who had been focused on their plates now watched with interest, while others at nearby tables discreetly raised their phones to record. Halim remained composed, holding the edge of the table gently to support himself as he stood. "My son, I don't wish to cause trouble. I only ask for what my body can handle." The manager shook his head, impatient. "It's not about trouble. You are taking up space without bringing enough consumption. Please, we need the table for real customers." The phrase "real customers" hit the room like a blow. A woman watching from afar widened her eyes in indignation. One of the young men who had laughed earlier now recorded more attentively, realizing something in the manager's tone had crossed the line. Halim tried to keep the conversation peaceful. "I appreciate your effort, but I cannot eat more than necessary. This is a teaching I've followed for many years." The manager cut him off, losing patience. "Then follow your teaching somewhere else. This is not the place for that. Get up, please." The order echoed sharply. The waiter watched with visible discomfort, but didn't dare intervene. Other customers whispered, uneasy with the exaggerated strictness. Behind a column, a young woman with a light scarf was already recording. She wasn't involved, but her steady gaze showed she was capturing every detail. Halim placed his hand over his heart, breathed deeply, and stood calmly. His body was fragile, yet his expression remained composed, as if he were accustomed to facing humiliation with dignity. "I understand. May Allah bless this place," he said softly, preparing to walk away. The manager stepped back, crossing his arms in triumph, unaware of the growing disapproval around him. Conversations faded, spoons halted mid-air, and the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath for a moment. The expulsion was complete, and the recording on the young woman's phone continued. Without the manager knowing, she had begun filming long before his first outburst, capturing not only his words, but also his posture from the very beginning. The whole room watched the unfolding scene as the elderly man walked slowly toward the exit, carrying with him a serenity that contrasted starkly with the harshness of the man who had thrown him out. Uncle Halim's departure seemed headed toward a quiet end, until something unexpected began to alter the atmosphere. He walked slowly between the tables when a cold gust swept through the restaurant, so strong it sent napkins flying and made cutlery rattle against the plates. The most unsettling detail was simple. The door was closed, locked with a metal latch that could never allow such a draft. A woman raised her arm instinctively to shield her face. "Where did that wind come from?" she exclaimed, confused. The manager, caught off guard, glanced toward the entrance. "The door is closed. It must have been the air conditioner," he said, trying to sound convincing. But the air conditioner had been off since early morning, a fact the waiter confirmed in a whisper. "Sir, the unit has been broken since yesterday." Before anyone could respond, a second event disrupted the place. A steel tray resting on the counter slid on its own and crashed to the floor with a loud bang. The noise echoed almost violently, making customers jump in their seats. There was no one within a meter of the tray, no movement, no hand nearby, nothing that could explain the fall. The waiter rushed to pick it up, startled. "I swear, it was steady," he said, looking around. The manager frowned, uncomfortable but trying to regain control. "Maybe it shook with the wind. Go back to eating." "Everything is under—" His words were swallowed by a sudden flicker of the lights. The lamps flashed, trembled, lit and dimmed 3 times in a row, accompanied by a glow that seemed to come from inside the wires themselves. Customers clutched their cups, their utensils, or simply froze in place. The whole restaurant felt unsettled, as if on the edge of something larger. The young woman who had been recording from the start raised her phone even higher, aiming it where Halim had stopped. Her expression changed instantly. "There's something here," she murmured, barely audible. The boy at the next table leaned over to see the screen. "Record that, record that." Through the phone, the image appeared to capture a luminous shadow moving behind the elderly man. It wasn't a reflection from a glass nor the shine of metal. It was like a soft arc of light, appearing and disappearing in a split second, too delicate to be noticed with the naked eye, yet clear on camera. The young woman's eyes widened. "Did anyone see that?" More people stood up, approaching cautiously. The recording showed something absent from the physical room, a glowing trace moving slowly, as if accompanying the old man as he walked. With each of his steps, the light seemed to breathe, expanding slightly and then retreating. The manager, already losing his firm posture, approached the counter where the internal security monitor was. "Show the last images," he ordered the security employee. The employee, still stunned, rewound a few seconds. On the monitor, something even stranger appeared. A bright point in the upper corner, as if a tiny spark hovered for a moment before disappearing. "That's not a malfunction," the employee said, voice trembling. "The system doesn't create this kind of reflection on its own." The manager swallowed hard. "Zoom in. I want a clearer view." The zoom revealed the same glowing shape captured by the young woman's phone. Brief, subtle, pulsating. Customers gathered around the monitor, while others approached the elderly man, observing him as if he carried something unseen that no one fully understood. The movement stopped. The noise died down. The entire restaurant seemed focused on something the cameras had detected, but that none of those present could completely interpret. The impact of the images left the restaurant unsettled. Several customers exchanged looks, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The young woman in the light scarf, who had recorded everything from the start, stepped forward and pointed firmly at the manager. "This was no accident, and you know it. Treat this man with respect. I want all the cameras reviewed, not just this part." The manager, shaken by the strange events, tried to regain authority. "Ma'am, I was only following the establishment's procedures." "No procedure justifies humiliating someone for ordering little," she shot back without lowering her voice. "And now there's something in these recordings that you need to explain." Other customers began to gather around Uncle Halim. A middle-aged man stepped forward, outraged. "I saw everything. He only ordered a small portion. He didn't bother anyone. You crossed the line from the very beginning." A younger group approached as well, some still holding their phones. "I was recording when the lights went out," one of them said. "And you can see a glow behind him. That's not a reflection." The discussion began to escalate, but Halim raised his hand gently, asking for silence. His face remained serene, yet his eyes held a depth that calmed anyone who looked at him. He drew a slow breath, rested his hand lightly on the table beside him, and spoke in a quiet voice. "Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. Praise be to Allah in all circumstances." The recitation was soft, almost a whisper, but the words seemed to flow through the room like a gentle echo. The atmosphere became strangely lighter, as if the heavy air from moments earlier had suddenly lifted. A woman who had been watching silently murmured, "When he speaks, it feels like the whole place changes." "Did you feel that?" The waiter nodded, touching his chest. "I can't explain it, but it feels like everything gets lighter." The manager, unsettled, took a few steps back. "This has nothing to do with the restaurant," he said without conviction. "Sometimes the system glitches, objects slip." The young woman in the light scarf cut him off again. "Stop, don't treat everyone here like fools. There are cameras everywhere. Review them now." The employee responsible for the monitor nodded. "I can check every angle. There's something strange on 3 different recordings." The crowd gathered around the counter where the main screen was. The operator rewound and opened 2 cameras at the same time, one from the entrance and one from the inner hallway. In both videos, whenever Halim walked by, a small luminous ripple appeared, faint but consistent. The manager raised a hand to his forehead, trying to hide his nervousness. This must be a technical issue." But the operator shook his head. "It's not an issue. I've seen glitches. They're square, distorted, or blur the frame. This light, it moves in a curve, and it only appears when this man walks by." Every gaze shifted to Halim. He, unlike what many might expect, did not look surprised, only calm. He held the wooden tasbih inside his pocket and recited another short phrase. "Allahumma ijalni minash shakirin. O Allah, make me among the grateful." His whisper drifted across the restaurant once more, creating a sudden sense of peace so strong that even the clatter of pots in the kitchen seemed to fade. A child at the next table whispered, "Mom," it got quieter. The mother simply nodded, moved by the unexplainable atmosphere. The manager tried to speak again, but his voice wavered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just thought thought he was being disrespectful to the establishment. A tall man who had remained silent until then responded firmly. He only asked for enough food. You overreacted, and now everything you tried to hide is being shown. The operator called the restaurant supervisor, who came quickly to understand the situation. As soon as he saw the recordings, his expression changed. He approached Halim with respectful composure. "Sir, allow me to say, we saw nothing wrong in your behavior, and honestly, I can't explain what appears in these images." The elderly man smiled humbly. "The world is full of signs, my son. Sometimes we notice them, sometimes we don't." Those present felt the atmosphere shift once again. There was no hostility left, only a mix of respect and deep curiosity, as if the old man's gentle recitations had touched something silent in the air, and that simple supplication, spoken like a breath, seemed to leave a quiet mark no one could ignore. The supervisor leaned closer to the screen, frowning as he reviewed the footage from before the conflict. The security operator replayed the video from the moment the waiter first approached Halim. The image showed him sitting peacefully, waiting patiently, causing no disturbance. The waiter's voice, captured by the ambient audio, confirmed, "Small bowl of soup and a piece of bread for table 3. Nothing unusual, nothing provocative, just a simple food order." The supervisor crossed his arms and asked to fast forward a few seconds. The recording showed the moment the manager approached the table, already speaking harshly, even before any explanation was given. "This doesn't bring enough profit for the house," he said, clearly irritated. People around exchanged looks. A man muttered, outraged. He started the argument for no reason. The old man hadn't even said anything. The supervisor asked to rewind again and increase the volume. Halim's voice came through clearly. "It's enough for me, my son. No disrespect, no provocation, just serenity." From that point on, the footage showed the manager losing control, raising his voice and gesturing aggressively, while Halim tried to keep the situation peaceful. The young woman with the scarf raised her hand. "Please, open the camera from the outer square too. I was recording, but I want to see what the system captured." The operator opened the second angle. The same scene unfolded from another perspective. Halim calmly seated, while the manager initiated the conflict for refusing to accept a small order. The supervisor let out a slow breath, visibly uncomfortable. "There is no inappropriate behavior by this man in any of the cameras. He violated no rule." The statement landed heavily in the growing silence. Customers murmured among themselves, confirming what they already suspected. The accusation had been completely fabricated. The manager, still near the counter, took a step back. This can't be right. He provoked me, I'm sure of it." A customer responded firmly. "Provoked you? You came over already angry, out of nowhere. It's all there in the footage." The manager tugged at his collar, loosening it. Sweat gathered on his forehead and his breathing grew heavier. The supervisor maintained a professional tone, though his displeasure showed clearly. "You accused him unfairly, and you even tried to expel him for something he didn't do." The manager ran a hand over his face, distressed. I just thought that—" "You thought wrong," the supervisor cut in. People around moved closer, forming a discreet circle and watching the manager's emotional collapse. He tried to speak, but his words tangled. His hands trembled, and a bead of sweat slid slowly down his chin. One of the employees whispered, "He's pale." The manager staggered slightly. "It was just a business decision. I didn't mean to offend." The supervisor crossed his arms again. "A business decision does not justify humiliation, sir, and certainly not lying." The tension deepened. This was no longer a simple restaurant argument. It had become a public unmasking of an injustice committed in front of dozens of witnesses. The manager wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, but more sweat appeared immediately. He seemed unable to understand why such a seemingly ordinary mistake was shaking him so intensely. The young woman in the light scarf, observing carefully, murmured, "He's shaking. Look at his hands." Another woman approached the elderly man and gently held his arm. "Sir, are you all right?" Halim smiled kindly. "Alhamdulillah, I am at peace." His tranquility, contrasting with the manager's growing panic, amplified the discomfort in the room. The air felt charged with something invisible, as if the truth revealed carried weight of its own. The manager gripped the counter edge, gasping. "I don't know why. I'm like this." Sweat now ran down his neck. His hands trembled so badly he dropped the order pad he tried to pick up. The supervisor stepped back, worried he might faint. The young woman, still recording, zoomed in on the manager, and his trembling only worsened. Customers stepped back slightly, startled by the intensity of his reaction. There was no immediate rational explanation. He had not run, had not exerted himself, had not been injured. Still, his body reacted as if under a pressure greater than anyone in the room could describe, and while the onlookers struggled to make sense of what they were seeing, the manager continued sweating and trembling, unable to grasp why his mistake had unleashed something he himself could not control. The turmoil had reached its peak. The footage, the manager's spiraling reaction, and the number of witnesses had turned the restaurant into a space thick with tension. People waited, almost instinctively, for the elderly man to speak. It was as if the entire room stopped breathing for a few seconds, expecting the most natural response. A complaint, a shout of indignation, a demand for punishment. The young woman in the light scarf stepped toward Halim, her expression resolute. "Sir, if you'd like, we can call the police. We have proof. You were humiliated for no reason." Another customer agreed immediately. "That's the least. He needs to answer for what he did." An older man, visibly outraged, added, "No one has the right to treat an elderly person like that. You should demand action." The supervisor, trying to manage the situation, nodded toward Halim. "If you wish to file a report, I can prepare everything now. You're within your rights." All attention fixed on Halim. The entire dining area balanced on an invisible thread, as if the outcome of the scene depended on the next words from his mouth. Even the manager, leaning on the counter, pale, trembling, afraid, watched. Halim, however, did not rush. He looked at each face around him with kindness, took a deep breath, and placed a hand over his heart. His voice came low but clear enough to reach every corner of the restaurant. "Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is sufficient for me, and He is the best protector." The phrase settled over the room like a gentle veil. No echo, no noise, only a sudden silence so profound that even the sounds from the kitchen dimmed, as if the utensils themselves sensed the shift in the atmosphere. The elderly man lifted his gaze and continued, "I do not wish punishment for anyone. My provision was not denied. My honor does not depend on harsh words. I forgive what happened." The young woman widened her eyes, surprised. "But he threw you out with no reason." Halim smiled softly. "My daughter, those who act harshly carry burdens we do not see. Sometimes a hard heart is only lost, not corrupted." The manager lowered his head, swallowing hard, as if those words struck deeper than any official reprimand could. A gray-haired man murmured almost involuntarily, "How can you, after all this?" "Moderation is not only for the stomach," Halim replied. "It is for the soul. Whoever learns not to fill the heart with anger lives lighter." The sentence touched the onlookers deeply. It was impossible to ignore the calm surrounding each of the old man's words, a presence that seemed to clear the room, dissolving the harshness that once dominated the tables. The supervisor drew a slow breath, as if he too had been affected by the serenity. "If you do not wish to continue with a complaint, we can end this here, but know that I am sorry for what happened." Halim nodded. "Thank you, my son. May Allah grant you wisdom in managing this place." The manager tried to speak, but his voice cracked. I don't know what to say." "Speak only the truth to your own heart," Halim answered, without judgment. The trembling in the manager eased slightly, as if those words had lifted part of an inner weight. The young woman, still filming, murmured to herself, "It's like the whole place has changed." And it truly had. A new atmosphere hovered over the restaurant, something no one could name, yet everyone felt. An unexpected stillness, accompanied by a gentle warmth in the chest, as if an inner breeze had passed through each person present. Some customers set their utensils aside. Others discreetly wiped their eyes. That small act of forgiveness had stirred something invisible, yet absolutely real. It seemed that the moment Halim spoke the supplication, the space around him shifted, as if every tension had been gathered and softened by the very light that accompanied his recitation, and everyone, without exception, felt the same quiet sensation move through the air. The place remained wrapped in that strange calm when a sharp pop echoed from the main speaker. Then the restaurant's lights flickered, first a small blink, then a longer one, and suddenly everything collapsed into darkness, broken only by the daylight entering through the windows. The sound of cutlery stopped. The clatter of pots ceased. The kitchen fell silent. Even the hum of the refrigerators vanished. It was as if the power had been ripped from the entire building. A customer muttered, frightened, "Now even the lights are gone. What kind of coincidence is this?" The young woman with the light scarf raised her phone, using the flashlight to illuminate part of the dining area. The beam passed over bewildered faces until it reached Halim, who remained standing, calm, serene, completely out of sync with the surrounding darkness. It was then that the internal camera, still active because it was connected to an independent system, captured something unusual. The monitor at the counter, now the only device still lit, glowed brightly enough to catch everyone's attention. The operator, confused, called the supervisor. "Sir, come look at this." The screen showed the elderly man standing, and behind him, a soft arc of light appeared in the recording. It wasn't a reflection, it wasn't a malfunction. The glow seemed to breathe, expanding in slow waves, like a radiance moving with its own life. The illuminated contour followed him just inches from his back, as if gently surrounding him. The young woman stepped closer, eyes fixed on the screen. It's the same light from before, but stronger now. The supervisor leaned in, stunned. This makes no technical sense. There's nothing behind him that could cause that. Before they could discuss it, a muffled sound broke the silence. A sob. Everyone turned toward the manager. The man, overwhelmed, had covered his face with both hands and begun to cry. His shoulders shook, and it wasn't a restrained cry. It was an emotional collapse, as if all the hardness he'd carried had shattered at once. He took a few unsteady steps toward the elderly man. "Forgive me," he said, voice breaking. "I treated you like someone lesser. I mocked your faith, and I even made up a rule to justify my behavior. No one expected it." The manager, so confident and arrogant minutes earlier, now looked stripped of pride. He continued, struggling. "I was wrong, not just here. I've been unfair to many people. I don't know why, but when you said that supplication, I felt something strike me inside. I felt ashamed." His sobs echoed between the tables, and no one dared interrupt. Customers watched, stunned, moved by the contrast between Halim's serenity and the collapse of the man who had humiliated him. The manager tried to speak again, but his voice vanished. He managed only, "Please, forgive me." Halim, as calm as ever, approached and placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "Allah forgives those who seek righteousness," he said softly, "and I forgive you as well." The soft light captured by the camera seemed to pulse slightly, as if that gesture had created a silent vibration in the air. The supervisor looked around, surprised to see how many customers were emotional. A woman wiped away discreet tears. A young man who had mocked earlier lowered his head. Others stayed perfectly still, as if witnessing something impossible to dismiss. The tension had transformed into something deeper, more intimate, and now everyone waited to see how the community in that room would respond to such a sincere plea. The power returned gradually, the lights glowing weakly, and the restaurant regained some movement. But nothing returned to how it had been. The atmosphere felt rearranged by a silent force none of them could explain, and everyone, without exception, looked at Uncle Halim with renewed respect. The supervisor called 2 employees and pointed to a nearby table. "Prepare a place for him. Get the most comfortable table in the house ready now." The employees hurried. They set clean napkins, placed a steaming bowl of soup and a plate with freshly warmed bread on the tablecloth. One of them approached the elderly man with a posture completely different from anything he had experienced there before. "Sir, please, sit here. The meal is on us. It's the least we can do after everything." Halim thanked them with a gentle smile. "May Allah bless each one of you." A man who had watched the scene from the beginning quickly grabbed the elderly man's bag and placed it beside the chair. "Let me help you, Father." Another customer pulled out the chair carefully. "Sit slowly, please. Would you like water? Another soup?" Halim settled comfortably, observing each act of kindness with quiet gratitude. His eyes grew slightly misty as he realized that people who didn't even know him were trying to repair an injustice they hadn't caused. Meanwhile, the supervisor led the manager back to the counter. The conversation wasn't aggressive, but firm. Only fragments could be heard. Unacceptable, improper conduct and formal warning, mandatory review. The manager only nodded, head down, his face still marked by tears. He understood that this moment was the consequence of his choices, but also, in some way, a chance to start again. The young woman with the light scarf approached the table where Halim now rested. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but could you repeat the supplication you said earlier, the one that brought so much calm?" Other customers gathered, forming a respectful circle around him. "I'd like to hear it too. Could you teach us?" What you said changed the entire atmosphere. Even the waiter, who had stood frozen during the whole scene, stepped forward hesitantly. "If it's not asking too much, could you explain that part about eating little? The 1/3? It was as if Halim's supplication and his act of moderation had awakened something within everyone, a sincere curiosity, a desire to learn, to understand what had transformed a scene of humiliation into one of reconciliation. The elderly man drew a deep breath, observing the attentive faces around him. He ran his hand over the wooden prayer beads in his pocket, felt the light weight of each bead, and lowered his head slightly before speaking. The meal before him was still steaming, but no one seemed interested in food at that moment. Everyone wanted to hear the voice of the man who, with only a few words, had changed the entire atmosphere of the place. The circle closed around the table, eyes filled with hope and hearts open, waiting for every syllable that would come from the old man's lips. In the days following the incident at the restaurant, the central square of Istanbul began to show visible changes. Customers who had witnessed the scene returned and talked among themselves, almost always mentioning Halim's words. Many began ordering smaller portions, others took time to drink water calmly before starting their meals, and some even paused briefly between each bite as a gesture of gratitude. One quiet afternoon, two young men who had filmed part of the turmoil approached the elderly man at the same table where he always sat. "Uncle Halim, could you teach us how to control the urge to eat more than we need?" one of them asked, holding a notebook. "Yes," the other added. "We don't want to live with excess. We want to be like you." The elderly man smiled, touched by their sincerity. "Discipline begins with intention," he replied. "And intention strengthens when the heart understands that the body does not need excess to live." At the restaurant, the supervisor had also made a decision. He invited Halim to guide the staff in brief meetings before their shifts began. The idea wasn't religious but practical, learning about moderation, respect, and gentleness when serving others. "If you could come once a week, just to recite that supplication, and remind us to eat calmly," the supervisor said, "it would be an honor." Halim accepted kindly. At the end of one of these gatherings, a staff member asked, "Uncle, why do you stay so faithful to this 1/3 rule? Where does such dedication come from?" The elderly man breathed slowly, placed the prayer beads on the table, and straightened his posture, like someone about to reveal a memory guarded for decades, something that explained the deep root of his practice and what he had carried since youth. The late afternoon in Istanbul wrapped the restaurant in soft hues, and Uncle Halim enjoyed the moment seated before a small bowl of soup. Each spoonful was taken slowly, as someone who understands that true nourishment isn't only in the food, but in the way the heart receives what sustains the body. The gentle breeze brushed against his thin beard, and his serenity reflected the essence of the balance he always sought. Eat with moderation, live with intention, give thanks before every act. As he savored that simple portion, he remembered that the prophetic teaching was not merely a health guideline, but a key to a fuller life. Curiously, specialists' comments began circulating, showing that modern science confirmed exactly what he had practiced for decades: less excess, better digestion, greater longevity, clearer thinking. There, seated under a sky slowly darkening, Halim seemed part of a quiet truth. When the soul aligns with what the Creator instructs, even the simplest moments become profound. If this story brought light to your heart, subscribe to the channel and watch the next video, continuing with us with more balance, more inner strength, and the inspiration needed for each step of your journey to reveal new stories within your own life.